Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Bertie Leroux Live. We have a very special show for you today, and we're going to talk about Beyondership, creativity, and brain profiling. And we have probably the expert on brain profiling on the show today. His name is Dr. Kobus Neethling, and we are very, very happy to have him on the show today. Here he comes in. Good afternoon, Dr. Kobus. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Wonderful. It's an absolute honor having you here. Bertie, thank you so much. You can take it from here.
Thank you very much, and welcome from my side as well, Dr. Kobus. For everybody out there, we would hold this interview in English. We are both Afrikaans, Boeresians, but we will do it in English because the audience would probably prefer that in English. Now, Dr. Kobus, thank you very much, first of all, for giving us the time. I know that if one talk to you, you need a couple of days, not a couple of hours, and not a couple of minutes. So I will try to be concise and talk to the subject, but obviously I would also talk a little bit about what's happening in terms of COVID-19 and the unfortunate situation that is taking place over the past 48 or 36 hours in KwaZulu-Natal and here in Gauteng. And because it all comes back to what the subject is all about. Now, Ivan has alluded to that about your past, and I'm proud today to be able to interview you. But I'm also proud to say that I know you for many years, and that I started out my life as one of your pupils when you were still teaching, and that is back in the early 70s. So I just want to kick off by asking you to just give us a brief overview from your days when you left teaching and moved from there into, if I recall correctly, college, and then to creativity and creativity thinking to where you're at today. Thank you, Dr. Kobus.
Yeah, okay, Bertie. I only taught for a very short few years, but it was enjoyable. I still have one of those, short years, I think it was about 4 years or so. One of those matric classes contacted me a year ago and said they'd like me to join their WhatsApp group. I thought, gee, and seeing them now after 200 years, they really do look different. But it was kind of nice, and it was nice to hear, they get some feedback from them and the way they experience this and that those years. But anyway, yeah, and then I became a lecturer, and then after a few years, so I can't remember how many years, but then a new kind of post opened up in South Africa, and I had no idea. It was the first director of gifted education in South Africa, and I really didn't have a clue what it was, but I applied, and because I had a doctorate at a very early age, I got my doctorate, and so people probably thought because I have a doctorate, I'm kind of clever, I should be able to do this job of the gifted. But what was interesting then is that I remember sitting in the office there in Cape Town in the gardens overlooking the gardens that. And I sat there for about a week, not knowing, where to begin and what to do. And so I went over to the Director General of Education, who appointed me, and said to him, I really want to do a good job, but I need a year sabbatical. Now, you can imagine having worked for less than a week and then asking to get a year off. And the magic of this was he immediately said, yes, I agree with you. And so that is when and that was in the 1980s, I went on the sabbatical, traveled the world to look for where will I find the best programs for giftedness, adults and children. I went all over the world, and I spent a lot of time in America, spent a long time in Columbia University. I had very good programs there. But eventually I met up with Paul Torrance at the University of Georgia. And that's where my life changed completely, because then I suddenly realized that giftedness was such a huge concept, much bigger than the sort of those years. Giftedness was when you had like 6 A's in matric and you had an IQ of 130, then you were gifted. That narrow kind of outlook on view on giftedness, which was nonsense. It's just one small part of giftedness. So I came back to South Africa. I developed all these programs. We trained hundreds of teachers throughout South Africa on how to teach, different kinds of giftedness in schools, primary, and it was exceptional. I remember one school out there in the rural areas. There was a small school of about 30 children and 2 teachers. And there I saw one of the best gifted programs in my life. So much so that I asked this principal, we actually included him in our training program, to write an article on, and he wrote an article on giftedness, went all over the world. So it was a good experience. So I did that for about 2 years, but then I also wanted to go back to Georgia University. And as I know, I've said this so many times, because Dr. Paul Torrance, the number 1 person in creativity in the world, was there. He was the professor there. And so I went back there and did a post-PhD on the identification and development of creative behavior. So, and after that, everything changed. Then from there onwards, I moved all over, founded the South African Creativity Foundation, started training and started developing the brain instruments, and so on and so on. And that has been kind of my life for many, many decades.
Yes, and I mean, you mentioned that you founded the South African Creativity Foundation, and you've been a president for the past 30-odd years. So you've been involved.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And we connected worldwide. The one thing I did is I became involved in the international creativity innovation, and I served on the board of the International Creativity Foundation, on the board there probably for 15, 17 years or so. And then you became connected to all the world leaders in creativity and the whole brain thinking and so on in the world. I remember Sidney Pons, one of the co-founders of brainstorming. They became my mentors. They all came to South Africa. I invited them there. As you know, we organized the World Conference on Creativity for 25 years, and we had about 40 international presenters here every year. So it was just a wonderful combination of people that we had, and it's this interconnectiveness that actually allowed creativity, I think, just to move on and to grow.
Fantastic, thank you for that. For those that's watching and going to watch it later on, maybe I just want to say that Dr. Neethling, he's mentioning that he's been involved, living his passion, creativity and innovation. He carries 6 degrees, of which 2 is master's degrees, 1 doctorate and 1 postdoctorate cum laude. An author of 90 plus books, 9 TV series. I think by this time it's probably much more than that. If you really want to know more about this person, you have to go and Google and get more information about him. But I want to move on to, there's a statement that I read, and I actually wrote it down so I can share it, and I've just added a little paragraph in there, and it reads, the statement reads, in these challenging times, and I added probably now more than ever, we all have to think differently, and for business to survive, they have to embrace change and become creative and innovative overnight. Dr. Neethling is that specialist in creativity and innovation. And he studied the brain for more than 30 years. And as he said, he's probably one of the knowledgeable person on the subject in the world. He refers to Professor Paul Torrance as being his mentor. But at where we stand today, he is probably the mentor of many millions out there. He also started the whole brain thinking program many years back. And I would like to just ask Dr. Neethling just to talk briefly about the NBI program and the origin of that in terms of the quartiles and the 8 dimensions development. And I know there's new developments on the forefront as well. Please, Dr. Kobuss.
Yeah, again, I kind of believe that you should always look around you and ask yourself, where would you get people with insights and inspiration that you'd like to attach to? Now, I mentioned Paul Torrance. As I was, it was a life-changing experience when I met him, but he was also created those years a little brain instrument called SOLAT, Style of Learning and Thinking. It was a left-right brain instrument, but it fascinated me. And with his guidance, then it was a long, long journey with him. We started to unpack this left-right into 4 quadrants of the brain, trying to determine, what are the preferred modes of thinking of children and adults that we work with. And so that kind of research led to the first, I don't know how many, 10 or 12 4-quadrant instruments that I developed. And later on, I kind of realized that we need something maybe more than the 4 quadrants. The 4 quadrants gives you sufficient information about yourself, the people that you work with, or your personal attachments, your friends, and so on. But so what I did is probably 10 years or so of unpacking and digging deeper into the responses of the 4 quadrants. And then it became clear that in every quadrant of the brain, there are 2 processes at work. And maybe research from now on will find that there are more actually, but 2 processes at work. So give you one, that because we don't have the time, we don't have the slides to show you. But the one of the quadrants of the brain on the bottom right of the brain is a quadrant that relates to people. So if you find yourself, you are dominant in that quadrant, you are comfortable in the presence of people. You'd like to connect with people, you'd like to share with them, you'd like to be close to people. You eventually like a job where it's people orientated. But it's interesting, then digging deeper and analyzing, we found that there are definitely 2 types of people. So you might find someone that is, if you only use the 4 quadrants, very strong in that quadrant. But then you look at these 2 people and you see, well, they're totally different. You see that, and that got us going. And so if you dissect that quadrant, you would find people that are people's people, but it's more in the small person. They like to be one-on-one. They like to be close to one-on-one. They like to take care of people. Empathy is a very strong factor there. And it's this closeness of work with people. But the other group then in the people's quadrant is a group that they're sort of outgoing. They like the crowds. They like to talk and inspire crowds of people. It's totally different people, but they're both in that quadrant because they're people's people. So by dissecting that, we now have strong people quadrant, but you can be an empathizer, the one-on-one kind of person, or the socializer, the more moving out among groups and people and inspiring and so on. And we did that to all the quadrants. And it gives us much more insight into the person we're working with, but also greater insight if it's a group of people or an organization and so on. And it doesn't matter if it's business or sport or education, but you do get a great insight once you get the 8-dimension information.
Thanks, Dr. Kobus. Yes, I mean, I have been involved with the right brain for probably the last 40 years myself in a different level. Than obviously than Dr. Kobus, and I'm passionate about the concept because at the end of the day, we need to manage as managers and as leaders. We need to manage people differently. And when we talk about the NBI whole brain thinking preferences, it all starts with a thought. We all know that everything starts with a thought, and that thinking affects everything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that is so crucial. As you say, we don't have the time to delve deeper. And I know Dr. Kobuss is 4 o'clock this afternoon. He's actually talking about that. And we will finish this talk and with just showing the link to Dr. Kobuss's talk this afternoon at 4 o'clock. And invite people to go there. So I'm just mentioning it now, and I've seen it thrown up there, and we will share it with you at the end of this session as well. And I'll invite you to get more detail and more info about the NBI brain profile, and maybe you want to delve deeper in that, and there will be an opportunity for you. But for now, I want to bring in the old concept of creativity and innovation, and the NBI profiling, because I know that it was discussed many times before that, we all thought that the right brain people are the creative people in the world because they just are more creative. But Dr. Kobuss proved and showed and reflected, and I certainly would like to share with us why it is not the case. Why everybody of us is actually and can be as creative as everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's a creativity in all quadrants of the brain, but it's sort of different kind of creativity. The R1 creativity, top right brain, is the sort of aha kind of creativity, is this imagination kind of creativity, coming up with kind of ideas and so on. But on the left brain, you often find ideas that are you perfect ideas. You work more systematic, creative in a sort of creative level to come to new ideas. So it's different, often when you see the way they develop BMWs, for instance, it's very much the whole way they approach it is like in a left brain kind of, because that's often the kind of customers they want, the clients they want, and so on. So it's left and right, but it's different kind of creativity. I read the other day, an article, I think it was, could have been Cambridge University, that it is research on jazz players and on left and right brain creativity. And they come up with the incredible research here that with your people starting out as jazz players, often you see the right brain creativity in them. They're finding their way, they're looking around, coming up with ideas, where the left brain creativity kind of they're already there, they experience, and now they come up with new uniqueness kind of in the jazz kind of thing. So the one is this trying out new things, the other one is taking those new things and expanding it and elaborating on it till you get kind of perfection. But the thing with creativity is that you must sort of ask yourself a couple of questions. Where would you start if you had a group of people that you'd like to say, okay, I'd like to make you more creative, in a sense? Because remember Torrance's words and Guilford and all those people, they all said the same thing. Remember, creativity is learnable and teachable. That is a point of departure for people. You need to understand that. Otherwise, you'll reject it. That's why young children are spontaneously creative, but older people often say, no, I'm not creative. So what happens if you keep on saying that, it forms a belief. And remember, then you live according to those beliefs. And that's not who you are. But you believe that, and you live that way, and you die that way. So it's very critical. If you keep on saying, look, I'm not creative, then of course you won't do it. It's the same kind of thing. So it is teachable and it's learnable. And then different ways to start a process with individuals, to say, but how will I start this process to make a group of children or adults maybe more creative? One of the ways, one of the Torrance methodologies was to say, but look at what are the skills that you would need to call yourself creative. What are these skills that you need? And if you look at the Torrance test of creative thinking, still the number one creativity test in the world, I believe, you find that there are a number of what you would call primary skills, and there's a number of secondary skills. But if you look at the primary skills, the creativity, the primary skills, that is where I believe you should start with people. When you sort of train those skills, immediately there's a sort of confidence that starts. Let me give you an example. For instance, fluency is the first skill that Torrance mentions that you should acquire. Fluency basically means many ideas. It means that you develop a skill that you've always got more ideas than everyone around you. Now there are three of these skills that are locked together. It's fluency, it's flexibility, and it's originality. Those three, it's incredible if you lock them together and you teach people this. Fluency then is just many ideas. You come up with many quantity. It goes for quantity. But then as you go for quantity, in a little bit flexibility kicks in, because flexibility means different kinds of ideas. Different kinds of ideas. I always like to use the example of a glass, because that's simple enough to understand. If I show you a glass and I ask you what can you do with it, and you say to me, I can drink water from this glass, I can drink cool drink from this glass, beer from this glass, wine, that's fluency. That's many ideas, and that's good. Just keep on that. But that's not flexibility. Flexibility, different kinds of ideas would mean, you say, I can drink from this glass, I could put sand in this glass and plant a little plant in this glass, I can break the glass, use it as a weapon, I can turn it around and use it as a hat for a doll, and so you carry on. So the more you go into the flexibility mode, you will find without any doubt that originality kicks in, new ideas. So new ideas come up and it pops up. Now those three go together. And within 2 or 3 days of training those three skills alone, we have seen children and adults amazing growth in their ability to come up with creative ideas. A colleague of ours, Andrea Alenikov, a Russian, wrote a book called Mega Creativity, which actually takes you through this process where eventually it's mega creativity, which means it's not like 10 ideas now or 15, it's thousands and even millions of ideas that you come up with. Because you must remember, I can't give you any ideas. You already stored it up there. But what I can do is give you techniques to take those ideas out, many different techniques to take these ideas up that have been stored in you. And then the next skill would be, now Torrance called it abstractness, but it's a bit vague. We call it getting to the essence, which means that a creative organization or a creative person must understand this. Because before you start applying all those ideas that you've created, you must first understand what is the essence of the problem. And I think, unfortunately, in South Africa, that is what we often miss. In government, in business, we miss the essence. So people would start spending millions and time and everything else, and eventually it solves nothing. The solutions don't work. Why doesn't it work? Because you've never understood what is the essence that I'm dealing with. It's in relationship to. Relationships go wrong because you never solve it, because you miss the essence. What is really wrong here? And the moment you can get to that essence, then you can start applying your creativity, your ideas, and so on, and then eventually it'll work. And if you don't follow that process, you'll keep on struggling, and especially in times like this, in times where it is exceptionally tough out there. People have lost their jobs, they look around and they despond. This is actually the time to now start understanding how you can grow your creativity, because otherwise you'll stay in that box and all you see is the walls of that box. You've got to come out and fresh ideas, and then eventually, that's the only way. There's no other way. And maybe just one more of Torrance's skills. It is, he called it resisting premature closure. Actually, what it's saying is that you got to stay open longer. And this is, I think, where we as South Africans go wrong tremendously. We go wrong because we close our minds too quickly. We see all this stuff happening out there. And I'm going to mention this as often too. We see all this stuff happening. Close your minds. And the moment you start closing it, you don't have ideas. You go into this anxiety mode because you've closed the ideas. It's difficult to stay open. I know often it's difficult to stay open. But these are the circumstances where you must stay open. It's called the incubation. Let things just marvel in your mind. Just stay open so that ideas can come in. But we are closing our minds too quickly at the moment in South Africa.
I love that. Thank you, Dr. Kobus. You know, it is so crucial. You know, I can only say to what you said there in terms of what is required in this country of ours. Amen to that. Because we need that. We need open-mindedness, and that leads me to the next question, where I'm saying we in terms of your expertise and speciality, we use the term creativity and innovation in the same breath. What is then the difference between creativity and innovation, if there's ever a difference between the two?
Yeah, it's very important, because even today in 2021, people are confused about it. I see it everywhere. What we find often, and you probably too in your work with businesses, you find that companies establish innovation teams. They don't start creativity teams. They start innovation teams. Now, the point is this, that it's two different processes. Creativity, as I just mentioned, is where you come up with all these ideas, fresh ideas, new ideas, whatever. Innovation is then taking those ideas and starting to process those ideas to eventually come out with a new product or a new service or new whatever. It's the processing of the ideas. That's innovation. But if you're not creative, what you then innovate is feeble. It means nothing. It doesn't contribute. This is what we have found. This is actually what we have found, is that eventually, after all these innovation processes, the end result is nothing. You've got to stimulate the creativity, but often it's not even the same people. Often you have a group of people who love to come up with new ideas, whatever, but they don't like to process it. And often the processing people, they say, just give me these ideas. I will process it for you. So you must know, absolutely don't have an innovation team if there's a very low level of creativity wasting your time.
Thank you, Dr. Kobuss. While you're talking about that, my sincere belief is that the COVID and the lockdown has put a cap on creativity and innovation to a large extent, because all of a sudden people are functioning from home. They are not rubbing shoulders. They're not sharing anymore. There's no ideas that have been thrown around during coffee breaks or even during a smoke break. What can we then do? What would you suggest companies do to sort of give momentum and impetus to people to start thinking creative and innovative in the organizations again, even whilst in lockdown?
That's a very, very, in a sense, a tough one to answer, because first of all, if you are trained and you understand creativity, you've learned it, whatever, then it doesn't matter if you're alone or not alone. You'll still keep on coming up with ideas. Of course, it's good to have it to share in groups and come up. It's always it's a preferred mode. But if you can't do that, that's why I say if you've been trained and you've created a culture in your organization of creativity, then people can be anywhere. They'll still be creative. I really can't tell you. What we have found, you know that too, is that with our webinars, we tried to make contact with people, and some of the webinars have had thousands of people and so on. And I think in that way you can stimulate that. And I think in organizations must make sure then if you find that the creativity is really going down and down, there's no new ideas because people are at home. I think as an organization, you just got to build into your weekly program, as I've actually seen in one of the companies we worked with in the US, is that they have a 90-minute program once a week where they've got people sharing ideas with everyone wherever they are at home, and it's interacting with them. They can share. It's an interactive platform. And that's kind of the way to do it. I don't know any other. If you're there and you're locked in, you cannot. And if you've not developed your creativity, in some way you need to open a conversation line. You've got to have it, communication line. That's what we've been doing. But there are probably other ways, of course, also to do it.
Maybe I would share with you an example that I personally have implemented in a company, is the concept of Masterminds. With the sole purpose of looking at R&D, research and development. So that we've taken people from all different spheres in the organization and put them together in this mastermind group, 6 of them, and they can then bring in expertise and a knowledgeable person in the organization to come and share ideas. But the concept then is some idea and a concept given to them on which they can build. And they can expand to bring that creativity and that innovative thinking out of the organization. In other words, there will be Zoom meetings on a regular basis. They've got a subject that they need to pull apart. And there's people with different angles of thinking, probably all aspects of the NBI thinking profile in terms of strengths that we have there. What do you think of that concept as a stimulus of that creative and
I support that fully, Bertie. I like what you're saying, and I think that's what people should start exploring in their own organizations. And again, the more they explore, the more they'll find there are creative ways of doing this more and more. But as you say, unfortunately, most people are kind of stuck and they where they are. But I like that. I like what you're doing, and maybe it should be communicated much further than where you are at the moment, because although things will hopefully change in the next maybe 6 months or so, there will still be a huge number of people that will keep on working from home now. I mean, that's not going to change. Everyone is not going back to work. I mean, I think that's a fact. So we need to develop mechanisms, to keep people going creatively, and it's out there. I think we should maybe have a little session on what are those possibilities. I think so.
I think it's something that I would like to leave with you, and for you to deliberate, and then maybe set up a session where we can talk about this concept much wider than that. But the third element of our discussion, and we've got 15 minutes to talk about that, is the concept of beyonder and beyonderness and beyondership. And I've shared with you where I talk personally about beyondership, because I believe that I've taken management and leadership and added to the tail of leadership the whole concept of beyonderness. And I know you've got programs and you've got philosophies around beyonder training and the concept of developing people to be beyonder thinkers. Now, before I get there, I just want to ask you, traditionally, leadership and management has always come to the fore. And I've recently read about some material about John Maxwell, would consider worldwide considered to be a boffin on leadership. And he speaks about 5 levels. Now, I'm not going to cover the 5 levels, but level 3 talk about production, responsibility in an organization about production, and that I link to management. The next level, the 4th level, is people development, and I talk at that level, I'd like to say leadership. But I want to go beyond that, and he talks about the pinnacle. And I would say at that pinnacle, we talk about beyonder. It is beyond the thinking of a leadership. Where others stop thinking and turn around, it goes beyond that. Now, creativity and innovative thinking definitely plays a role there. But when we talk about beyondness and beyondership, it's a difficult. What is your view on this lifelong debate that will always be there between the difference between management and leadership?
Yeah, I think you're right, Brady. I think it's also time to maybe to ask the question, but there's a next level, that is not, you can't package everything for 200 years in this sort of little package of. But I agree with you. I think there is something beyond leadership, which looks at, I would say, it looks at things which are more conceptual, more different, more not in the ordinary domain in a sense. It's like when we train super sports teams, for instance, beyond the concrete kind of training, that you start training them at anticipation skills, which is way beyond what has been trained for 100 years. How do you anticipate what your opponent is going to do in the next? How do you pick that up? How does the top cricketer like A.B. de Villiers anticipate the ball that's being bowled? So that is anticipate, which is not part of the conventional package of training. And I think this is what you're saying, that there is something beyond the conventional definitions of leadership. I totally agree with that. It's not being fully kind of explored, and it's not being packaged in a way, but it's without a doubt, it is there. But coming back to you, and I'm looking at the time now, coming back to the Beyonder, Beyonder was one of the reasons that I linked eventually to Torrance, because I think I've said this many times. It was in 1958 when Torrance developed his TTCT test, Torrance Test of Creative Thinking. Same year, he identified a few hundred children, different ages, I think mostly 6 to 9. And then he tested them with creativity testing, other tests, and then he followed them. And every couple of years, he looked them up, he retested them. So he kept on. I was there the last 10 years of this research and this study, which lasted first 30 and then 40 years. When these Beyonders, these children, were now adults. They were in their mid-40s and in their late 40s. Then he asked the question, how many of them, after 40 years, and you can't argue against a longitudinal study of 40 years, he asked the question, how many of them became Beyonders, and what were their qualities? As you said, how many made like dents in the universe? And they were absolutely in different disciplines. There was people in education, in the medical field. It was just different. And then he, as I said, he looked at it, and he looked at the qualities that they shared. There were about 8 or 9 of these qualities. And that became the Beyonder program, that you can train and teach people all these qualities to eventually instill beyondness in them. Because I kind of believe that most children are born Beyonders. They just along the way, you don't see it anymore. So when Torrance died, and I was, as you know, there at his deathbed, and the University of Georgia, which was the sort of Torrance center there, was the intellectual property holders of Beyonder. They actually gave me this certificate, which I treasure, to continue with the Beyonder program. And we redeveloped it in many, many kind of ways, and so on. So this is what we try to do. And what is gone forever about the Beyonder program is that first you believe that you can become a Beyonder. You can become that as an individual, as a child, as an adult, and then also the organization. So what we've been doing for many, many years is eventually taking organizations, sometimes 10,000 people at a time, 800 or whatever, so eventually the company becomes a Beyonder company. And then at all levels of the company, you would see this. You would see this, their results. You would see their culture. You would see it everywhere. And what we found there are a couple of factors that you recognize immediately in a Beyonder organization. First of all, of course, we spoke about that they're creative. They are fresh. They come up with new ideas. If you look at the way Rassie Erasmus trained the Springboks, that would be like Beyonder training. You train them left brain, right brain. They applied it differently. And a team that didn't have all the stars and the best players became world champions. So it's that kind of thing. You see it in the culture. You see it in the results and everything else, and so on. So it's that creativity that you would see in a Beyonder organization. Develop different kinds of creativities. For instance, if I'm in sales and I'm selling whatever I sell, I would develop that part of the brain that that sort of, how do I reach more people? How do I get whatever? So it will be different kinds of creativity. Secondly, and something I've spoken about a lot, you will not show me one successful creativity person in the world that is not passionate. It doesn't exist. Because if your productivity, what you produce, depends on your energy, and the energy comes from your passion. So if passion drops, everything drops. So you've got to have that ongoing passion. Doesn't matter. And I've spoken about many, people who are 100 years old and still have that and still produce. So you've got to make sure, first of all, you look at your passion, ask yourself, if you had to score yourself 1 out of 10, and if it's somewhere below 8, then you got to stop and say, just what can I do about this? What do I do? How do I change my life so I get my passion? Passion is critical, because without that, you lose energy and you can't produce. So it's as simple as that. So in any organization, before you ask about productivity, ask about passion. How do I get the passion of my people in my organization up there? Because then you'll see the results eventually. And this we've done there are many ways to stimulate the passion. So passion is critical as a connector, as part of the Beyonder. A Beyonder organization is a passionate organization. And then there are many others, but the third factor I always speak about is the question about courage. I've written about this many times. I've written a TV series about courage, because to be creative means that you are going to change things as you go along. New ideas will come and whatever. And often you don't implement those ideas. It doesn't happen. And the reason is you don't have the courage to make it happen, because there's often opposition, there's this and that. And so without integrating your courage and your passion with your creativity, eventually you will not see beyondness, because there's a lack of courage, whatever. And it's important also, if you look at courage, not to see it as one concept. There are different kinds of courage, and to identify maybe the 1 or 2 courages that you're not good. That's where you are really lacking. That is why you're not changing your life, and that's why things are not happening. So these 3 are integrated in a Beyonder person and a Beyonder organization.
Excellent. I mean, it's indicative of your NBI brain profile that you find what you love doing, and that love doing comes through in the passion. And I talk about passion, the 3 P's: passion plus purpose equals prosperity. And if you drive prosperity, you will never be successful. But passion could even be could be after your purpose, but those 2 go hand in hand. And that equation to me, passion plus purpose, is prosperity is non-negotiable. But I also loved when you were talking about, when we talk Beyonder, we talk about and as I talk about the eagle, the ability to fly above everything and have a view of 360, much wider, not just of my person, of my staff, of my company, but also of my country and of the world.
Of the universe. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you fully.
Yeah, absolutely. We go there. Dr. Kobus, we've got a couple of minutes left, and I think for those that watching, there's something that would just want to throw to you and ask your opinion about it. We're talking about management. We're talking about leadership. Where we find ourselves as an effect of COVID, but now also in effect of what's happening in terms of Gauteng and KwaZulu Natal and the uprising and the looting and all of that. Taking cognizance, therefore, of Beyondership, and you were talking about I would just like to want my comment on that, and I'm saying, to me, Nelson Mandela to me was a Beyonder. He was a leader that beyond his world renowned as
absolutely.
somebody different. We, unfortunately, in South Africa, probably as leaders by definition. So I'm asking you, taking cognizance of what we are talking about, just we're talking about now, what is your message to South African citizens and also to our leaders, considering the situation that we're in? It's a red herring.
I think, Maddie, if you just go back to what I said a minute ago about creativity and courage and creativity, if any of those three lack now in leadership, it's not going to happen. You have to have leaders that come up with new ideas of solving this problem. Coming up with new ideas, not the old-fashioned ideas. You're not going to do it. You've got to have an incredible passion to make it happen, and you should have. And then the wonderful quote of Paul Torrance: creative people, creative leaders can perform miracles, but they're always in danger of crucifixion, which means you should have the courage to keep on going. Otherwise, you won't. And I think that is lacking in our leadership. Those three combined, maybe one or two, but not the combination is not there. That is what we need. And what they often don't understand, you can train people in all three of them. You can teach and train them, and it's there, not happening. And I think for South Africans, yes, it's terrible times, and you tend to go below that line in times like this. It is so, and it's difficult to stay up there and to still say, I look around and think rationally about things and not become totally over emotional here and stay above the line. It's difficult, but again, you've got to stay open. Don't close your mind too quickly and make decisions now, because often in these circumstances, when you close your mind now, you're going to make wrong decisions.
Thank you, Dr. Kobuss. I'd like to close off with a statement here that I read in about yourself, saying that innovation of the mind without innovating the heart is no innovation at all. And honestly and sincerely, as you've said, leadership, we need leadership with courage and creativity. If it's not there, it's not going to work. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Betty. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Take
Kobuss.
care then. Thank you.
Ivan, you muted.
Hello, Dr. Kobus. My big takeaway from today was those three levels of creativity. You were talking about fluency. Can you just repeat them for us? Fluency, flexibility, and the last one was?
Originality.
That's perfect. Yeah. Those were my three takeaways, and very, 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 very amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Neethling. We really appreciate it. And there you go. If you have any questions, please post them in the comment box, especially if you watch this afterwards, and we'll get the questions to whoever it's for. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and we're looking forward to seeing you again. As we mentioned, just coming on the screen again, Dr. Neethling has a webinar he's doing this afternoon, so you can go and see on the screen there, and also you can find that link in the comments below. Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you in the next session.
Thank you very much. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.